Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, and welcome to episode 24 of Strokecast. Back in May, in episode 14, I talked with Ann Daly, a stroke survivor and practicing attorney featured in the film A Teachable Moment. We talked about her recovery, about the importance of getting to the hospital fast, about her return to the world of running, and her experience as one of the featured stroke survivors in the film A Teachable Moment. You can check out ateachablemoment.film to learn more about the movie, or go over to strokecast.com/Ann, A-N-N-E, to listen to my conversation with Ann. This week, though, I talked with Mark French, another one of the survivors featured in the film, and actually the person who spearheaded this project. Mark French is a family man, an entrepreneur, an adventurer, and an inveterate skier. He was known as Superman to many who looked up to him at home and work, but fear set in after suffering 2 massive strokes with a grim diagnosis. Mark had a 1% chance of ever walking again. With unflinching willpower, he embarked on a healing journey that has found him not only walking, but skiing again. As founder and CEO of Leading Authorities Incorporated and its LAI video production arm, Mark dedicates his time and resources to sharing his message of hope and healing. The making of A Teachable Moment is just one of his many projects to raise awareness around stroke prevention. And in this episode, we jump right into it with a discussion about stroke prevention, stroke awareness, and stroke literacy, before we get into a deeper discussion about the film and Mark's personal story. So, with that in mind, let's hear from Mark.
It's a big problem, public awareness and sort of the myths about stroke, that it's something that only happens to older people. As your own experience demonstrates, this is a stroke is equal opportunity. It happens to everyone. Men, women, black, white, fit, not fit. The literacy out there about it, I think, is pretty low. I think that people are surprised to learn that almost 800,000 Americans every year have a stroke. The conventional wisdom that it is a old person's disease is so wrong. I think it's so important to understand how risk factors, knowing what those factors are, understanding how to recognize a stroke when it happens and what to do about it quickly is so important.
Right. Especially it seems that with the changes in technology, there is stuff they can do now in that first 6 to 24 hours that you couldn't do 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, even in my own case, today, with the use of thrombectomies, as you know, they can go in with a catheter and fish out the clots, which is very new, but it's important that it be done quickly.
What I'd like to do is hear a little bit more about what your life was like before the stroke and then what happened on that day.
So I was a very fit person. I skied all over the world. Just months before, I had been doing extreme skiing, the Alps. I've been a heli skier, skied Alaska, skied the West. I was very, very physically active. I did cardio almost every day of the week. The day that I had my stroke, I worked out at 4:30 in the morning, and I would work out on a recumbent bike. And when people saw me working out, I did it so intensely, they would feel sorry for the bike. So I was very, very fit, and I had no idea that I was at risk for stroke. I thought I had none of the risk factors, those being primarily hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol. But I did have one of the risk factors, but I was unaware that AFib put me at a 5 times risk of stroke. I went to a good cardiologist in the Washington, D.C. area. I had had a catheter ablation in the early 2000s. But in not one of those conversations with my doctor had we ever talked about how AFib put me at risk for stroke. So it was a complete surprise. On the evening that I had my stroke, I was hosting a dinner, started driving home, actually stopped on my way home right next to a stroke center hospital in Washington. When I was ready to move forward, put my hands on the steering wheel and felt like what seemed to be an electric current going through my left arm. Pulled the car forward and took a route that I took home every night, and got confused on the way home, actually got lost, and was then rushed to a community hospital where I was misdiagnosed, where it took 14 hours to get an MRI.
Wow.
And when I had that sensation of an electric current going through my left arm, I did not recognize it as a symptom of stroke. So when I got to the hospital, it was not until the following day that I had an MRI. And at that point, I was diagnosed as having both an ischemic and a hemorrhagic stroke. And I was actually medevaced to the rooftop of the hospital that I was parked outside the night before, that was a comprehensive stroke center hospital. So in my own case, I didn't realize that AFib put me at increased risk of stroke. I did not recognize what was happening to me when I had the stroke, and I went to the wrong medical facility. I should have gone to a comprehensive stroke center hospital. I went to a community hospital. And as you know, time is not your friend if you're having a stroke. I eventually, after being treated at the George Washington University Hospital in Washington, where I had a craniectomy, I was eventually transferred to the National Rehabilitation Hospital, where I did my recovery. The doctor who did the craniectomy told my wife and family I had a 1% chance of ever walking again. My oldest daughter took issue with that and said, "You don't know my dad." But I'm very, very grateful for the good recovery that I've had, although I'm still in recovery, and this is 3 years later. The main impact of the stroke entailed vision field cuts in both my left and right eyes, total paralysis on my left side. And I've largely recovered the use of my left hand, although there is some residual dexterity issues. But I've learned so much about stroke since then, which I feel is so important that people understand. And that is that it is a massive public health problem in this country. When you think about 800,000 people having strokes every year, when you think about stroke as being fifth leading cause of death and the number one leading cause of preventative disability, it's a big health issue. I was astonished to learn that 80% of strokes are preventable. And when I first heard that, the first thing that came to my head was, well, if 80% are preventable, why aren't we preventing them?
Right.
And I think it's because of stroke literacy. It's something that happens to someone else, not me. And being aware of what to do about it and getting help quickly. So since I had that stroke 3 years ago, I've resolved to learn as much as I can about it to help prevent it and help promote good recoveries. Because if 80% can be prevented, I'd like to erase it from the earth.
And what's really, really key about that too, especially as part of the larger conversation is happening in the country around things like healthcare costs. My stroke, when I saw the bills that came through that the insurance covered with upwards of $200,000 and counting for ongoing therapy, the sheer cost in human life and human potential and just in sheer dollars is just astronomical on the scale across the country.
The economics of stroke are huge, and it's in everybody's interest to do something about it. And it is something that we can have real impact. if we have the right conversations with our doctors and we take the proper initiatives to manage the risks, we can make a real dent. So our goal with the film, A Teachable Moment, has been to promote public awareness, to put really a human face on this terrible disease, and to help people understand both the dimensions of the disease, the fact that its reach is broad and wide, and to motivate people to do something about it, but also to give people who have had stroke hope. As you know, your life changes after having a stroke. And I think it's very, very important to keep hope alive. And I know in my own instance, meeting other people who had had strokes and seeing them recover inspired me and helped me to believe that I could have a good quality of life after the stroke. And so the film is intended to show people that there is life after stroke, and it can be a good life, maybe a little bit different life, but it can be a good one.
One of the things I want to mention is you've mentioned the challenges with AFib. Most folks have never heard of AFib or atrial fibrillation. Is there a way for somebody to know that, hey, maybe I should go ask my doctor about whether or not I have AFib? Are there any warning signs about that condition that folks should be aware of?
So first of all, I think it's important to understand that atrial fibrillation is very common. In fact, it impacts over 6 million Americans every year. I was in California over the weekend, was having a meal with two friends, and I found out that both of them had AFib. So it's not something exotic. It is very, very common. And if you have it, you may be symptomatic, you may be asymptomatic. And what that means is that if you are symptomatic, you might have symptoms like feeling your heart pounding, shortness of breath, dizziness, but you may be asymptomatic and not even know it unless you're monitoring yourself or you're seeing a cardiologist who is monitoring you. In my own instance, I was symptomatic, and I had taken some initiatives to address it. In 2003, I had catheter ablation at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, which had taken care of the problem temporarily, but it was not a permanent fix. But if you have AFib, it's okay, but you need to do something to manage the risk. And there are things that you can do, such as being on an anticoagulant. Because what happens with a lot of people who have AFib, which is basically a condition of the upper chambers of the heart not working in concert, and blood tends to pool, forming a clot and blocking the flow of air or oxygen and nutrients to the brain. So if you can do something to bust up that clot or prevent it from forming in the first place, it is a means of preventing stroke in the first place. So having a good conversation with your doctor is really important. Taking charge. I never had the conversation with my doctor about how AFib put me at increased risk. It is important to do so. It can be life-saving. Today, in addition to drugs, there are devices which can prevent clotting, such as a device called the Watchman, which I had implanted just a couple of months ago, which acts like a filter which prevents clots from going to the brain. So there are a lot of things that you can do, but the most important thing is to educate yourself, have good conversations with your doctor. Don't be the ostrich with, your head in the sand. Ignorance in this case is not a virtue.
Right. And I'd suppose if you do have that diagnosis, that it becomes even more important to make sure that, as we all should, is just in general making sure that other folks in our families and other folks just in general are very familiar with the be fast warning signs, the symptoms that somebody could be having a stroke, especially, because
Absolutely.
Time is so critical.
Absolutely. But too fast, I would add the right facility. So obviously, recognizing the symptoms is very important, and getting help quickly is critical, but also going to the right place.
Absolutely.
Going to a comprehensive stroke center hospital where, for example, thrombectomy is available is going to give you an opportunity for a better outcome than if you go to a facility that doesn't have the expertise or the facilities to optimally treat you. So if you have those risk factors, I think you need to investigate where are the comprehensive stroke center hospitals in your area, so that if you have AFib, it's really important to know that. So in the event something happens, you will know where to go and go to the best place.
And in addition to the appropriate medication, it probably becomes even more important if you have also a PFO, which is a little hole between two sides of the heart that 1/3 of the population has, that can allow clots to pass through. And if you spend a lot of time traveling or sitting still or doing anything where your legs aren't moving, where you could be more at risk of DVT or deep vein thrombosis, where clots can form in the lower legs from just not moving for a significant amount of time. Probably need to have a higher level of awareness about that stuff as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that I know a little bit less about than the AFib as a trigger, but anyone that does distance traveling, I think by now is probably aware of the risk that poses and the importance of moving your body to minimize the chance of a blockage.
And prior to stroke, you were already the owner of a training company and video production organization. Is that right?
So my company represents thought leaders in business, media, the politics and current affairs, thought leadership. We also have a digital and video communications business. But yes.
So it really moving to this video format and producing the movie, it just seems like it's just one of those things that just aligns naturally with the things you were already doing and already passionate about before the stroke, about taking advantage of this medium to go ahead and share this message.
With your podcast and with the technology available through social media, it has really democratized the opportunity to get information out to a very large audience. So what you're doing with your podcast, what we're doing with the film, is an opportunity to reach a lot of people about what I believe is a critical topic. And so, yes, there definitely is an alignment between what I do professionally, which is to tell stories and communicate important messages to audiences all across the country, and in fact, around the world. The film was an opportunity to leverage the resources of my company in a way that could have real impact on stroke.
So, I mean, what was the best thing about creating the film?
I think one, meeting other survivors and hearing their stories, all of which were different than mine, but that had some similarities, and to talk about some of the common challenges that we had. And I think engaging the broader public in a conversation about stroke, those were things that have been enormously satisfying.
Awesome. That's one of the things I see constantly in stroke forums and in other shows I've listened to is that one of the most important things for recovery is going out and engaging with other stroke survivors, whether that's going to be through an in-person support group, which has been tremendously helpful for folks, an online forum, or other opportunities to go out and, see others' stories and learn more about others' experiences, because, stroke is one of those things where for so many people, they find it so isolating as their physical abilities change, emotional and cognitive abilities can change. And it can be very easy to think that, I'm the only one going through this, and you're not. And something like a teachable moment really helps share that there are those other stories out there, and there are those other connections that are out there, and other people who are doing things with this experience.
Bill, I got a phone call last year from a woman whose husband had a stroke. He was a skier, been told by his doctor that he could never ski again. And his wife Googled stroke and skiing and saw an article in a publication of the American Heart Association that had been done about me, which spoke to me returning to skiing in February of 2016. And as I mentioned, I was in inveterate skiing. It's one of my passions. And so I had been told I would never walk again. He had been told he would never ski again. And when I spoke to his wife, I just said, don't believe it.
Right.
Sometimes we're too quick to accept the judgment of so-called experts. And, they may know something about statistics and generalities, but each person is different. And, in my own case, I'm skiing again. I'm walking. I'm not letting that stroke define me. And I don't believe others should either. It has certainly been challenging, and I won't make believe that it's been otherwise. But I think that so much of recovery depends upon what we do. So much of the conventional wisdom is wrong.
Yeah, we have learned so much in the last 20 years, and there's still so much misperceptions about that whole the 6-month limit for recovery and the 2-year limit for recovery. And that's all such nonsense. And it becomes a big problem when survivors start believing that, because your brain will, of course, through neuroplasticity, adapt to the limitations you impose on it. What was the biggest challenge with putting together this project?
I think that reaching out to partners who were essential to the film's distribution. You can make a great film, but it's only going to have impact if people see it. So we had many conversations with potential partners. We reached out to the American Stroke and Heart Associations, as well as MedStar Health, the National Stroke Association, and NIH. What we found was a lot of enthusiasm for the film, because I think that there is a growing understanding that there is such a dearth of literacy on this topic. So I think that was an important challenge, and how to tell the stories. And as you know, we use the narratives of 4 survivors, including myself, which makes it personal. This is not death by PowerPoint. It's actually it's actually seeing up front and personal people who have successfully navigated this road.
Facts tell, but stories sell is one of the things I teach in sales training, because when you want to help people understand something and really, really learn about the experience, the details and the stats, and that's great information, but to really have an impact, you really have to be able to tie that back to a personal story, something that's going to help make that connection between humans, because ultimately that's how we communicated. It's how we've communicated for thousands of years. So going forward, you talked about engaging with the different organizations and figuring out the different partners. So what is the plan for sharing the film with the wider audience and greater distribution? How can folks see it or partner with an organization to see it?
Yeah. So there are many, many, many private screenings of the film that are going on all across the country. The film is being shown at film festivals, and it's available and accessible online through a Teachable Moment.film. And we're encouraging private screenings. We're also working with umbrella organizations like the American Hospital Association, the Pharmaceutical Research Manufacturers Association, and others, including local hospitals around the country, to use their social media and positioning to get as many eyes on the film as possible. I really believe that the more people that see this film, the more lives will be saved, and the more lives that will be made better by giving people a vision of what their lives can be despite the stroke. So we're trying to, we're trying to multiply the impact through partners that have large audiences of their own. We're also looking at making it available on Netflix and other distribution means. But right now, the best way to access it is just by going to the website at teachablemoment.film. At the debut of the film, someone in the audience asked the question: isn't stress a causal factor in strokes? And one of the doctors made the very, very good point. It is not the stress that kills. It's how you respond to the stress. If you're having a hard day at the office and you come home in the evening and you drink too much, or you're eating junk food, that is not a great way to respond to the stress. And we can all choose how we respond. And so if we keep a healthy lifestyle in mind and have a good way of responding to the stress, that also gives us a better chance at minimizing our risk.
So what do you know now that you really wish you knew before the stroke? Obviously, get to the Comprehensive Stroke Center is probably one of the big things.
Well, I wish I had been better informed, and I wish I had understood the connection between Afib and stroke. Had I known that, I feel that I could have been on meds that might have prevented it. Obviously, I wish that I had recognized the symptoms, and I wish that I had known where to go for the optimal treatment. So those are lessons that I've learned since. I can't go back in time and I'm not looking in the rearview mirror, but I do want to reach out to people so that those who are at risk can do something about it to minimize their risk.
Absolutely. The big value in looking back at what we would have liked to have known then is so that we can share that information with other folks going forward, because while there's a lot of awesome people in the Stroke Survivor Club, we really don't want to do anything to encourage more people to join this club.
I think that really, for me, that is the silver lining in having had the stroke, the idea that I can take this experience and apply it in a positive way for others. I can't go back and change what happened to me, but I feel like I can have a very positive impact on other people, and that is very meaningful to me.
And that brings us to our hack of the week.
I think you have to be patient with yourself. I'm a very highly motivated, highly driven person, but sometimes I put a little bit too much pressure on myself. And I think that being patient with yourself and understanding that this is a process that's going to take some time, and it's it's not a quick flip the switch, but it's something that in time can get better. I think that one of the important things for people to know about stroke is that unlike a lot of other neurological diseases, it is not progressive. And with the brain's incredible ability to heal itself and make new connections, that you can actually get better. It takes time. I've been told years, sometimes even decades, but there's a lot of hope out there. For those among us who are a little impatient, it's sometimes it's difficult to accept that it's going to take time, but so just being patient with yourself and maintaining a positive outlook. I think a lot of people that have stroke, it can be a very, very challenging process to maintain a positive mental attitude.
Well, Mark, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us on Strokecast this week.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. And if I can be of any further help, please let me know, and good luck.
So how did you like that? I really enjoyed talking with Mark about his passions this week. If you'd like to know more about the film, be sure to check out ateachablemoment.film. You can also find the trailer for the film over at strokecast.com/Mark. Do you know where the nearest comprehensive stroke center is? Best time to find out is before a stroke happens. Second best time is probably right now. Be sure to subscribe to Strokecast in your favorite podcast app and check out the Strokecast page on Facebook at facebook.com/Strokecast. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.